What is going on, gamers? Hope you're doing well today, and welcome back to Predecessor. Today we are looking at the new Predecessor patch notes version 0.2.3. Been a little while since we had a patch. Obviously, the devs went away. Holiday season, nothing to be unexpected about. But we are finally back. There is a new patch out, coming out today, in fact, on the 10th of January. So that's pretty exciting. We're going to be taking a look at these changes, getting a look at what's been going on, what has Import Jungle and Blood Mortius been up to with their mega brains. We'll get to the bottom of it. Hey folks, the first balance patch of the year. This one is primarily targeting item build diversity with a sprinkling of hero balance. More changes and improvements are cooking. Let him cook, which you can expect to see soon in future patches. Until then, we've heard community feedback, and we hope these changes not only help level up the meta a bit, but also shake things up to keep you on your toes. Definitely pretty excited. Meta has definitely got a bit stagnated. I think a lot of stuff has been figured out right now with regards to builds and heroes in general, so it's good to see that they're targeting that, trying to make the meta shake up a bit, keep it interesting. Keep it fresh during the early access. So, Countess changes. First up is Countess. We've mainly focused on giving her some small stat adjustments to tweak her late game durability, as well as her general slippiness. Her healing potential is still something we're keeping an eye on, especially because we know that she'll be one of the heroes impacted by some of the item changes we've implemented in this patch. Rest assured, we'll be monitoring your feedback. So, we got Countess changes. Base health increase from 550 to 560. 10 base health. Not really very noticeable. Won't make much of a change in lane, and she's losing 5 health per level. So this means obviously that she loses 90 HP, 80 HP overall at level 18, because she is getting plus 10 at level 1, and she's losing 5 move speed. I think this is actually a pretty big change. It's hard to get a feel exactly how much 5 move speed is, I think, without playing more, but overall I think this is probably a really nice change. And then her Shadow Slip recall duration is also getting nerfed as well. Honestly, I think Countess's damage and numbers are generally pretty fine in my opinion. She definitely does pop off late game if she gets there and scales, but I think she should be struggling to get to that scaling a little bit more than she is right now. So for me, this is like the big change, and the big thing they're impacting is like, I think that she gets to mid late a little bit too easy, doesn't really struggle that much in the early game. She's really slippery with her Shadow Slip, obviously, and then also just her hitbox in general is really small, so it's really hard to consistently hit spells on her. So you pretty much have to play perfect into her to put her behind, because if she is matching mage scaling, she generally just does so much more than most mages in mid to late game teamfights, because she's so slippery, does so much damage, so much sustain. She just kind of pops off with her healing. So I'm glad to see that they're hitting some of these smaller things. I think like Shadow Slip duration, the recall duration, and the movement speed. I think these changes are much bigger and could definitely see her. I just want her to generally feel like it's harder to get away with it. I want to feel like I really got outplayed by Countess if she gets out of lane phase, or she plays really well in lane. Whereas right now it feels like she just trades very freely, honestly, and there's not much a lot of mages could do about it, because it's very hard to actually hit counter damage on her with the recall, and how much you can dodge with it, and then just how mobile and small she is in general. So I'm glad to see these kind of things getting hit. Maybe this movement speed nerf will mean you can run her down a bit more often in lane. That'd be pretty good. Deca. Every team needs a good support hero, so today we're looking at Deca, slightly improving her damage output, help her compete in lane. 4 AD. It doesn't look like a lot, but actually it's pretty substantial for range supports to have a little bit more AD, helps them trade and poke a little bit more aggressively in the lane phase. So we'll definitely probably see that have an impact overall. But I would say that it's not a massive change, but it is pretty noticeable. It's more noticeable than you'd think it'd be. I think you'd be surprised how much of a difference this kind of thing could make. But I think Deca's already in a great spot, so I don't think she necessarily needed a buff, but I guess her win rate percent is a bit low compared to stuff like Richter and Steel, who I do think are really easy to get away with right now. I definitely do feel like the power of range supports isn't really prevalent in Predecessor right now. It doesn't really feel like if you're a range support, you can like bully out a melee dual lane that easily. Partly, and mainly, I think, honestly, due to how strong minion waves are and how much health they have, it's kind of hard to get a strong minion advantage, and then use that kind of to aggressively poke in lane. But these are kind of just the mechanics of Paragon-style games in general, I guess. So that's just generally how it goes, but I guess they're trying to give a little bit more power to that. That's my read on this, is like, yeah, ranged lanes aren't really winning as hard as they should be able to against stuff like Richter and Steel. So just trying to give buffs to kind of like the range supports to give them a little bit more lane power and kind of separate them from the melees in that regard. Drongo Shrapnel Cannon R is getting a bug fix, which just states the CC immunity in the description. I guess it was just not listed correctly. Gadget's another hero getting some attention this week. Specifically, we've noted her sticky mine ability slightly, but to compensate level out her damage output, we've also increased the ability's scaling, as all our heroes keeping an eye on her and making further adjustments. So 5% more magical power scaling on the sticky mine, but the cooldown is being increased by 2 levels at all ranks. I think this is a pretty fair change. Her bomb definitely does get really low right now, to the point where, like, yeah, you may as well, it's basically your auto attack at some point. So I definitely don't think this is too surprising to see. I think this is a much more fair cooldown, and it gets a little bit of a scaling buff, so when you do hit those bombs in mid lane game, you'll be doing a little bit more damage, but she won't be able to poke quite as aggressively or just completely zone heroes out of fights. It feels like, yeah, if you're like staring at a corridor down, staring Gadget down in the corridor, you just literally can't walk up. She's just spamming bombs on you. I've had multiple times where I'm looking at like a rampage or something, and I'll just throw like 2 mines and an RMB on him, and he'll lose like half his life, and it took like 4 seconds, you know? It's like such an insanely short poke cooldown. Very hard to deal with, so I think this is a perfectly fair nerf. And then, yeah, speed gate root duration is also getting decreased a bit. I think this spell is really strong. And yeah, the root duration will definitely limit her. This is mainly going to be a nerf to her kill pressure in lane. And also, sometimes when she escapes from ganks, but I think 1 second will still get you away from a gank most of the time. But it can definitely be the difference between you picking up a kill in mid lane, throwing the gate behind somebody as they're retreating. You could definitely catch them off guard in that regard. So this is probably the biggest way I'll see this getting impacted is like, yeah, when you're looking at fishing for kills, it still should be fine as an escape tool. Because you normally when you use it to escape, you get the speed buff as well. And then the root just completely stops him from chasing you. So I think for escaping, it shouldn't be that big a nerf, but it's mainly nerfing her offensive pressure. Grux has been naturally very dominant in the offlane, with few heroes able to meet its overwhelming aggression. We're lowering his durability a smidge, making playing him more of a challenge, and giving more opportunities for enemy heroes to punish his hostile playstyle. So 20 base health lowered. This is a bit more substantial than the plus 10 that Countess got. I mean, base health is always pretty relevant in the early game, so these kind of changes, they look very small, but I think especially in offlane, you'll feel this a lot. Like Steel, for example, doesn't really care about this that much because he's mostly magic damage in the early game with his percent health, I guess, and the shield damage. But even then, he's still altering a lot. So I think most offlaners will definitely have an easier time dealing with Grux levels 1 through 2, where I feel like he's generally pretty strong. Honestly, I think Grux kind of trowels in a lot of matchups. Trowels. Between like maybe 2 and 5, 3 and 5. Where most offlaners get access to their full kit, but he's definitely really strong at level 1 and 2 especially. I think he's really hard to deal with, so it could be easy for him to stack a wave and kind of like limit the timing where he's actually like not as strong before he gets access to his ultimate, where he pretty much wins every 1v1. But this will definitely mean that you have more of a window to fight him level 1, 2, 3, and kind of prevent him from kind of getting that early wave stacking going where you can't really contest him anymore. So this is a pretty good change. It just limits his early game power, gives people a little bit more ability to play around him. Howitza's landmine ability, aka the most broken ability in the game, has been subject to some tweaks and improvements this week. With lower the distance an enemy mine can knock you back to tackle some of the frustration from being mined from far away. In tandem to this, we've also increased the self-inflicted knockback distance that comes from using the ability, letting Howitzer get back up to mid lane from river. Hope you'll find these changes to be a blast to play with. You could definitely already do this, but it was like weirdly inconsistent. There was definitely times where I thought I had the angle, I didn't get it. So enemy target knockback is being decreased by 20, and then the self is being increased. I like this change a lot. I think his mine is way too strong right now. This is technically also a nerf to the CC duration, I guess, because while you're being knocked back, you can't do anything, but if you're getting knocked back for less time, it's technically a nerf to the duration of the ability as well, and how long it CCs people for. And then, yeah, this is really a nice utility, because I feel like there's a lot of times where I'll just narrowly miss. You know, if you look over my Howitzer VODs, you definitely see a lot of times where I just narrowly miss the angle or something, can't get back up the wall. I think this is definitely more substantial, like, actually in mid lane physically, like between the 2 fog walls, like that part of the river, where you get up that ledge. I think you should be able to do that pretty consistently now. That one I've had a lot of troubles with, compared to like actually the one by the river buffs. But yeah, I think it is a nice changes overall. I think Howie's E is way too strong, just in general. Just super fucking busted to play against, so nice to see it getting taken back a bit. And yeah, I like the self buff to the utility. Kalari's 1-2 item spike has been a bit too substantial compared to many other heroes, which has led to a few changes today. We hope we'll balance her on the field. As ever, we'll be monitoring her performance. Deathmark base damage is getting increased at ranks 2 through 5. So this isn't that relevant for most of the game because you actually max 6 second compared to R&B, at least from my experience. But then the scaling is getting decreased by 7% as well. So this is actually like pretty much a net nerf to her 8 through 13 or so, I guess. And definitely a big nerf to the scaling throughout the game. So a big hit on her E generally, but I think a lot of her damage comes from her R&B, so I'll be interested to see how this makes her feel overall. And then her guillotine is losing 10, 20, 30 damage. Not a super substantial amount, but yeah. I feel like Pred in general, they like to be smaller on the numbers, then hit again if it's still a problem. Which it's not a mindset I hate. It's just different to deal with, you know. So Chimera, Spirit Regeneration bug fix. Tooltip's getting fixed. Narbash, cooling all orcs. Narbash's late game healing is going up. We think this change will really help his ability to support his allies. So as usual, we'll be monitoring Narbash's performance going forwards. And then Song of My People is getting 5% scaling. Very cool. I think this will not change much at all. Honestly, I think Song of My People is kind of just a dead ability. it's a fun spell, I guess. There's definitely times where it's mainly laning, I think, is where it's most impactful, and it is a bit of a buff to his early laning healing, I guess, if you do pick up AP early. MP, sorry, magical power. But generally, I think this will probably change nothing. Severog. Poor Severog has really struggled lately to survive the early game thanks to his low durability, something we've addressed slightly today. The goal is to help Severog effectively scale to become the tank his team needs to bump up his sustainability alongside his durability to help stop wild rhinos from running him down. Could be anyone they're referring to here. Base health getting plus 10, and then plus 5% healing on his siphon, so giving a little bit more sustain. Yeah, again, these numbers look small. I talked about the Countess one being small as well, but they do kind of add up, you know, in conjunction with items you buy and having base resist and stuff like that, so they look a bit more effective than they are. So this will definitely make Seb a bit more tanky. And then this healing buff is probably pretty nice for his siphon. You can get a full wave siphon now and get a lot more healing than you would in the past. So this should be pretty nice for Sev's early lane phase, which is definitely where he struggles right now and why he's got so many problems in the meta. I think it's just that he really can't contest waves at all. He's pretty much always getting shoved in, has 0 prior against good players, and you're just playing on the tower the whole time, and it's pretty painful. But, you know, these will help him out a bit for sure. Steel, everyone's favorite big orange cyborg, continues to be a strong offense thanks to his ability to scale comfortably into teamfights. In today's balance patch, we're hitting his early game mana pool, opening up opportunities for any heroes to punish him if he commits too hard. So they're changing the scaling mana cost of Bull Rush to 75 from 60 to 80. Pretty small nerf overall, I'd say, for Steel. I think, honestly, maybe you just need to hit his RMB percent numbers, but I think, you know, it is going to be noticeable. He definitely does have some mana issues in the early game. He can't continue fighting for a long time. But yeah, I would say this is pretty... It'll be a noticeable change, but it doesn't really hit the parts of Steel that feel strong. It's kind of hitting other parts of him and seeing if that makes a difference. So I'll be interested to see how much of an impact this has on his lane phase, but this looks pretty minor to me. Rogue Crest is getting a buff, plus 2 power. That's pretty cool. Assassin Crest, same thing. So just a little small buff to Rogue Crest and Assassin Crest. They are kind of weak, honestly, for laning especially. They're definitely more oriented towards jungling, I'd say, than they are towards laning. Stats are just generally a bit lower. So it's nice to see like a small AD buff, but probably not too substantial. Will help the early game a little bit, for sure. Tempest. As part of our efforts to combat the many tank/mage builds that have been cropping up lately, while keeping Gideon's Tempest/True Silver build intact, we've tweaked the damage on the Tempest. It's alright, just remove it. It's bad anyway. I'm not afraid to say it. Tempest's base damage is getting lowered from 30 to 20, and the scaling is getting increased. So just making Tempest a bit more mid-late game in general. Personally, I think this crest kind of sucks if you're not a tank, so that's just me, but, you know. I guess if you do build it now, it's less of an initial spike and more of scaling power. Tier 2 Lockshaw. Lockshaw is getting reworked to fit larger changes to the Leviathan item, which you can find further down this page. Lockshaw and Leviathan have obviously been pretty dead in slot since the substantial nerfs they received from the initial patch where they were pretty strong on the initial build. They definitely got taken out a lot. Pretty much never see them built anymore. If anyone builds them, they're probably trolling. So the cost is getting decreased from 30 to 950, so it's a lot cheaper. The health is getting decreased from 200 to 150, but honestly, this is, even price-wise, this is pretty value already. Like, you're losing the health regen as well, but you're getting 50 magical armor, so it's actually a really nice early item to build, maybe, against a magic damage lane or something, because it's got health and magical armor on it. And these are generally 2 really good stats for early game. So 950 to get health magic armor, and then you also get anti-heal, so new passive Blighted Veil, receiving magic damage reduces the source healing by 20% for 3 seconds. So this is like the premier, you know, Countess offlane item. Anti-Countess offlane item. This is a really good easy rush. 950, just completely shut down Countess offlane pretty much off the bat. And then the recipe is now Vitality plus Reps. Again, 2 great items to build for early game. Flat health is always really, really valuable. So it's pretty good. And then, yeah, overall, I guess we'll see what Leviathan is like, but this looks like a pretty solid tier 2 to me. Astro Catalyst, long awaited. This is for Ray. Ultimate CDR takedown decrease from 25 to 20%. Honestly, I think Astral Catalyst is a pretty bad item, but it is funny, and if you do get value from the effect, it is pretty disgusting. So I guess they're just hitting it for that reason, because, yeah, I guess in a game where someone picks Astral Catalyst and they get 4 kills and they ult again, or even less, you know, depending on the ultimate, it is pretty nuts. But overall, I think this item's pretty bad in general, so I think nerfing it is kind of whatever for the most part. I think it's pretty dead in slot. Does anti-heal apply to the ability that triggered the passive? I would think not. I would think you take the damage and then it applies. But that's just my thoughts on reading it. Not 100% sure. Have to test the game. Augmentation. We've adjusted Augmentation's stats slightly to help it stand out from other items, giving it a more unique identity and hopefully paving the way for more unique builds with the item. So the physical power is getting decreased and the attack speed is getting increased. I think that's pretty interesting. I like this rationale a lot. I definitely think that a lot of the items in the game feel like they have very similar stats. But they kind of have different actives, but it feels like you're building the same stats every game. For example, Lightning Hawk, Dust Devil, and storm bow. I don't know what it's called, but those 3 items, for example, I think are a good example of items that essentially have pretty much the same stats. They are slightly different, don't get me wrong, but they're basically the same stats, and you're just building by different effects. I think that's like something should be looked at, but I like that they're hitting augmentation a bit and just changing it up. So this is way more attack speed and less physical power. So it's definitely a different vibe. It'll be interesting for certain heroes. And maybe even better for something like ADC as like a last item when you don't want to get extra crit. This is like a decent buy now, or a more interesting buy, because I think getting more attack speed at that kind of stage of the game is pretty interesting as a last item compared to getting just more power, some attack speed. I think these stats are like more interesting for certain ADCs and stuff. Overall, pretty cool, I think. Demolisher, bursty ADC builds have been taking over. Demolisher is one of the largest contributors to this, with Revenant on his way, Crit Kalari showing up feeling more comfortable taking Demolisher down a notch. So the first strike passive is getting lowered 50% to 35%. You're not sure why this is getting nerfed. I imagine it's because of the assassin like blue build people are doing on ADCs right now, which is where you do Resolution, Mind Razor, Vanquisher, and then Demolisher, and then the first hit you do on someone is like 1 bajillion damage, and then you just burst people really, really quickly. So I guess it's just hitting that build in that way. I guess this is the one that's pushing that build over the edge. But personally, I don't see this item built that often in my games. So a little surprised to see it getting nerfed. But I can understand the rationale, and maybe that build is just doing too much damage or is coming up too high on the stats, and that's why they're taking it down. Dust Devil, we've given some nice quality of light buffs to Dust Devil to better emphasize the more fun perks of the item, the boost speed, the attack speed. The aim is for the item to feel easier to buy as it offers more bang for buck. So attack speed is getting increased from 2% to 3% per stack, and movement speed from 10 to 15% when you have max stacks. I think Dust Devil is a really interesting item, and I honestly think it's really good. I think the problem is that it's not that good as a first item, and Sky Splitter is so good right now that Sky Splitter is almost always your second item. So I think it's really hard to build right now because you don't really want to, I think rushing Sky Splitter is kind of jank. You normally want to get Lightning Hawk or Storm Lightning, whatever it's called. I should know the names of the items, but I don't. All right, soon be. Into the Sky Splitter, right? So as a second item, Sky Splitter is almost always the choice. And I feel like Dust Devil doesn't really compete with Lightning Hawk and the other one as well. Just in terms of stats, and also the fact that you can't start with physical power when you build it. You have to start with attack speed, which is pretty naff for lane phase and last hitting. So overall, Dust Devil is definitely more of a second item, it feels like, but Sky Splitter is just way too strong right now. So it's hard to kind of build a Sky Splitter or a Dust Devil, I find, and you don't really have the slots unless you want to build it as a last item to kind of fit it into a build. So while I feel like the item is pretty good, I do like it a lot. Maybe it'll be better now. Maybe it will compete with Sky Splitter with these kind of stats, because I think the effect is actually really strong on Dust Level, but I just think it's very hard to build with the nature of ADC builds in their current form. So I'd like to see, maybe more changes to stuff like Sky Splitter, tone them down a bit. Maybe taking the crit off Sky Splitter and stuff. Like, I think taking crit off Sky Splitter would be a great way to nerf it. That kind of promotes Dust Devil a bit more as, like, the crit attack speed on it if you want to go down that route. But there needs to be more changes, I think, to overall AD itemization before things like this can kind of be too realistically built. But I think it is still pretty cool. The buffing it, I do like this item a lot. Conceptually, when I read it, I'm like, wow, I really want that item. It's just hard to find a slot for it right now, and I don't think it really changes with these buffs. But it could be that it competes with Sky Splitter, just not being an insanely standard item right now. So definitely worth a try, but I have no faith, I'll be honest with you. Legacy, up until this point, you lost 10 physical power, completing Legacy. Today, we're giving it the correct amount of physical power, adjusting its haste to compensate. Huh? This item was already very potent as a second or third option, which hopefully will fall more in line as a niche tech option rather than being a necessary pickup in every game. So getting plus 10 power, which apparently you lost in the build path, and then losing 10 haste. Definitely see this item pretty commonly as a second or third choice. So I guess that makes sense for it being nerfed. It's just kind of overbuilt. I guess Leviathan is kind of competing with it now. I think Legacy is magical power, right? Or magical defense, so I guess the new Leviathan will be something that competes with it. But, I guess they're just amending it and then giving it a small nerf because it's a little bit overbuilt. But it surprises me. I don't know if, like, Sky Splitter's in here. Maybe it is. Yeah, so Sky Splitter's not even in here. Just speed scrolling. It kind of surprises me they're hitting stuff like Legacy, but they're not hitting stuff like Sky Splitter. Sky Splitter's built every game. Or even stuff like, I don't know, maybe Azure Core compared to Combustion, stuff like that. I just feel like there's a lot of items that are like this, and this kind of rationale, while I agree with it, I think it's applicable to a lot of items in the game. So it surprises me to see some getting hit and others not. Maybe the others just aren't showing up strong enough in the stats. But generally, I just think it's a good, I agree, but, like, why are we already hitting some things, That's what I'm confused about. Leviathan, from a design standpoint, has been problematic thanks to its potential for mage abuse and its positioning as a must-have item as a haste capstone for tanks. To combat this, we're shifting its identity to a new and much-needed anti-heal magical armor item. This provides a new option for tanks who need solutions to help them counter heroes like Countess, as well as upcoming sustained-based magical damage heroes we'll be adding in the future. You can expect a rebrand/rename for this item in the next patch to help it stay on theme with other anti-heal options. And as usual, we'll be watching for your feedback. Tainted Breastplate Maybe. I don't know. I made it up. The cost is getting decreased. Health is getting dropped a little bit. Health regeneration is getting lowered to 180%. And it's adding 30 magical armor. This is pretty much stonks with regards to stat value, I think. I think overall getting 30 magical armor here is like way worth the drops here. And then the passive is getting reworked. So receiving magical damage reduces the source's healing by 40% for 3 seconds. Obviously, like they say, anti-count this item. I think this item's a really conditional, actually, and very weird because it only applies on getting hit by magical damage. So it's actually very, very, very situational. It's pretty much only Countess right now because not many other magic damage dealers are like vamping a lot. It's not very common. I don't know if maybe Crunch's passive is magic damage or something. I think maybe he has some magic damage in his kit. So I guess realistically you could build it into Crunch, but I don't know why you would. So maybe it makes sense in the game. I don't know. But like, I think it's very, very, very situational right now. You're very rarely going to actually end up picking this up outside of lane against Countess. But I mean, I do think the stats are very nice on the item. Maybe Lockshaw will be built as like a tech item in lane phases against magical damage heroes like Steel. Could definitely still be reasonable, but overall, yeah, I don't really know. It just seems very, 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 very situational. And then you have 5% damage mitigation, doubled versus targets affected by Blight. Okay, that's kind of interesting, actually. Maybe I'll take it back. Colossus is actually a really interesting value effect. It actually has a lot of value against, oh yeah, Sevarog's a good example. Steel is magic, but Steel doesn't heal. Sev does Omnivamp, though, Sev does Vamp, so I guess Sev makes sense. So this is actually is this just global mitigation? That's kind of a wicked effect, then. So taking 10% less damage against anybody that does magic damage to you is pretty interesting. So maybe this item is a bit better than it seems, but I still feel like you wouldn't want to take it over the other magic resist options unless you're against something like Countess. So we'll see how it goes. This effect is definitely interesting. Probably should read the whole item before I make any big statements. But overall, I think definitely an interesting rework, and yeah, we'll see how it just fits in the game. Malady, combined with other compounding effects, Malady is one of the biggest factors behind Kalari's recent dominance. Increasing this item's cost hopefully help alleviate this a bit. So it's definitely just, slows down Kalari's tempo a bit. Plus 100 gold means just to farm like an extra wave or, get more kills and stuff like this. So yeah, just slows down her tempo. And obviously finishing Malady slower means that wave clearing slower, means she's farming slower. Lots of hits like that. So just generally, yeah, like they say, it will just slow down Kalari's tempo a bit in the game overall. Again, this kind of change looks small, but realistically, this adds like 2-3 minutes potential, maybe even more, to her completing her full build, just because of how much slower the tempo of her farming will be as a jungler or a mid laner. So it would definitely be more noticeable than you'd think, just reading like, oh, plus 100 gold, that's like nothing. But it's more about the time that she loses farming that item, which means that she's slower to getting her other items and stuff like that. Mutilator, wow, really? The Mutilator's anti-tank identity and overall statline has made it feel like a must-buy for many characters. We're hoping that today's nerfs open up more build paths and more diversity for bruisers. So once again, Mutilator's getting hit 1.25% to 1%, and the max health steal on Devour is going from 8 to 5. This could begin to be the death of Mutilator. I still feel like it's going to be a pretty must-buy on heroes like Crunch, but it's definitely getting closer to kind of bringing it down into, I mean, I guess you don't want Mutilator to not be built, right? That's why it's kind of a hard situation. You don't want to nerf it too much to the point where it just feels bad. I still think it's going to be good on Crunch. It's probably going to be good on Grux. Heroes like this, I think it's fine if it's good. You just want other items able to compete with it, or other heroes able to compete with it in general. Like stuff like Sevarog, right? He can't ever build Mutilator. So he needs to be able to actually deal with Mutilator, like, with regards to, like, how much damage it does in the early game. Can he actually contest lane? You don't necessarily want him to smash people, but you don't want him to be just getting one-shot by Crunch as soon as he finishes the item, right? So that's kind of what they're aiming for here. And I think this is probably closer. It's probably getting to a point. I think definitely the maximum health steal, this is really overlooked, I think, in general on Muti. And I think this effect is really, really strong. So lowering this by 3%, I think, is quite substantial. And we'll definitely hit it a bit. So yeah, once again, Mutilator getting changed. Maybe we're getting closer to it not being mandatory on half the game, but we'll see. Nightfall. This change is actually more of a bug fix in disguise. As previously, you were losing stats of completing this item before today. I guess there was some component that they were overlooking because it's two different things. Nightfall now has a brand new recipe. We've also lowered its cost to make it easier to buy. So now, I guess it's now honed crease plus bloodlust. I don't even know what bloodlust is. I guess it builds into something, but I don't know. I don't even know. I know this one because this is the one that builds into Terminus and King's Edge, but I have no idea what that side of event is. So it must be something very specific that builds into some specific item that I've never seen before as a result. But yeah, just general stats lower. I guess you're actually still losing stats now because they didn't buff it. Oh, it's the one that builds into beauty. Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess you're still losing stats, but they are lowering the cost, so it's a bit cheaper. But overall, I think Nightfall is a very specific item that doesn't really work that well how the game is right now. I feel like it doesn't make you strong enough, like a hull breaker or something in League of Legends, but it also doesn't really. It's kind of not useful outside of that context, right? So I think it needs to be a little bit better, maybe for it to be more of a buy. But maybe it's better if it's split pushing, and I haven't really tested it much. So we'll see if these changes do much for it. But I think honestly, so many of the assassin items are so strong right now, and they all have such great effects. It's hard to find a space for something like Nightfall, even if you want to play split push. I feel like I'd rather have something like Dread, or I'd rather have Malady, or I'd rather have, you know, Pain Weaver. Like, I feel like all of these items are just this. They just have better value than this item brings, even though this is meant to be like the split pushing, soloing out enemies item. It just kind of ends up limiting your team fight power and doesn't really give you as much strength, I think, in the side, compared to just building good assassin items in general. So overall, I think it won't change much about it, but it's good to see that it's getting buffed a bit because I do think it's pretty weak. Raymond is getting nerfed. So sad, dude. Everybody loves Raymond. So sad. So the synthesis healing increase is getting removed. So actually the regen effect is the same. I think the regen effect as part of it is really strong right now. But the overall healing is getting removed. And also, I think this is in conjunction with the Tainted Totem nerf. Yeah, where you don't get the self-healing buff on Tainted Totem. So the Raymond Tainted build is not as good now by any means. But I still think Raymond's in a really strong spot. Build that shit immediately as support, dude. It's broken. Still really good. Overall worth it, I'd say. Tainted Guard is getting an ability haste buff. It's been the subject of some big nerfs with tank itemization, and now with changes to Leviathan, we're looking to slot in a bit of ability haste to allow our tank builds to offset the total haste lost. So getting a little bit more ability haste increase on Tainted Guard. Pretty nice. I still feel like the issue with Tainted Guard is that they have to hit you, but overall the item's like fine. I think it's got like reasonably better stats than Tainted Totem, but I just feel like the effect of Tainted Totem was so much more broken. But maybe with Nirvana not applying on yourself anymore, Tainted Guard be more of a build in a lot of games. So yeah, definitely could try some Tainted first. Getting +5 haste for free is pretty nice for support, certainly. But I still feel like Raymond is still a really good item. But this could be better if you do want to build some anti-heal ASAP. This does definitely buff the rushing anti-heal option if you're against like a heavy healing team and you are support or something. It could definitely work. Tainted rounds on hit focus build. Haven't seen how much play as we wanted. Maybe because every item has crit. So today we've adjusted Tainted rounds to try and make it more appealing for people to buy and try out. I think this item's actually pretty fine, just very underbuilt. Definitely works. Again, it's the same issue of like committing a crit slot to it, but if you're fine with 120% crit, then you could build it as a last item and have anti-heal or something like that. Overall, I think it's in a pretty decent spot, but they're giving it a small tactic buff just to make people pay more attention. Yeah, so the Tainted Totem change, directly targeting abuse case for non-support characters, crunch rampage encounters looking at you. Honestly, I've rarely seen it for that reason. If anything, I've more seen it be mega abused with Raymond, honestly. And just getting insane self-healing combined with Tainted Totem, but, you know, I think it's okay, I guess, if it doesn't apply on itself. It is more of a support aura, and it does feel weird that this is kind of like a core tank item all the time, but I think that is because Tainted Guard feels really situational, compared to Tainted Totem, where you know you're getting the anti-heal value when you have this item just by standing near people, and it feels a lot better to have that, because Tainted Guard doesn't have any kind of active application like a Thornmail in League of Legends, where when you CC the enemies, you know, you apply. I think Tainted Guard, unless I'm, you know, mega mistaken, compared to Tainted Totem, this is just way more usable if you want anti-heal. If you want to stop their healing, this is way easier than, like, I stand in their face and hope they hit me. Because if they don't hit you, like a Countess, for example, is never going to be auto-attacking you unless she's already won. So you're actually getting no value with this against Countess, right? But if this had, like, the active component, maybe, of, like, you know, when you Richter ult 4 people, they all get the healing debuff, it would feel a lot better, I think. But they generally seem to prefer aiming tainted items at like more suspicious or more specific scenarios, and they have like they're much more specific than kind of being general case like that. So I guess this is how we will have to be dealing with, but it is something to consider that this is a lot more usable than something like Tainted Guard in general. Tectonic Mallet had a major bug. The man was almost a deficit to picks up. Now we fixed this, making the Mallet a very powerful item for bruises that synergizes well with items like Augmentation or Void Helm. So now you gain 5% move speed with Tectonic Mallet. You also lost a bit of magical armor. But the bug fix no longer factors in the combat penalty for bonus power. Okay, so overall, Tectonic Mallet could be a lot stronger now. I definitely recommend trying this for offlane. This item should be really, really solid. Definitely give it a try. It should be good against, you know, your matchups like Steel and stuff like this. I don't think it will outdo like a Mutilator as a first buy, but Mutilator Mallet could be a very solid build. I think getting 5% move speed all the time is actually a really, really big buff in this kind of game. So I would definitely give it a try for an offlane player. Should be in a pretty good spot right now. Definitely give it a go. I think these fixes are great, and I think the item's very interesting. But yeah, the fact that it had no move speed on it was so weird because it's like you get bonus damage from move speed bonuses, but also you don't have any. So good luck. But this is a lot better. So this would definitely be cool. Give it a try for sure. Terminus. This bug is getting fixed. The infamous secret testing bug. Is definitely getting abused on live a lot more frequently, where you could essentially just stack the shield forever. If you ever see someone with Terminus and they have like a 2,000 health shield, this is how, because they're actually abusing a bug, but the bug is fixed, so very cool. We can all sleep peacefully at night. True Silver Bracelet. Another change to the mage / tank builds have been cropping up more and more lately. We love this remain a staple pickup for Nalmesh and Gideon, so changes help position this item is less enticing first by carries like Gadget. Yeah, this item sucks on Gideon. Devs don't know what they're talking about, but it's fine. 50 base health, making the item even worse on Gideon and in general. So stop buying True Silver forever. Never buy it ever again, or you're dead to me. Void Helm. Finally, we have some nice quality of life improvements in Void Helm. Keep in mind that movement speed is diminishing returns. So generally, while it's nice, we're mindful of monitoring movement speed creep. So the buff on Justicar, this is what you get when you have full stacks of Void Helm, I believe, which is like 8 procs of magic damage or something, 840 hits. So I guess, you stack it pretty quickly. So you're now getting 15%. So now the new build is Mutilator, Tectonic Mallet into Void Helm, and you just run them the hell down at 2,000% movement speed. But yeah, overall, pretty interesting patch. No rev drop yet. Devs must be sleeping. But yeah, overall, I think a pretty good patch. Hit a lot of stuff that I generally have issues with, but I think some of these changes can be a bit heavy-handed. I definitely think the devs have more of a tendency to be lighter. But maybe that's just their style. I think that's okay as well, honestly. It's just something I have to adapt to personally. I guess, personally, I'm more used to, like, numbers being a little bit heavier. Like, instead of Countess gaining 10 health, she gains 30 health. It's something wicked like that. But this is definitely a bit more on the lighter side. But I think that's okay. The game is still getting kind of figured out. I think generally when metas are slower as well, it's also very interesting. You think of games like StarCraft, for example, they almost never get changed, and the meta changes all the time. People just get better at dealing with stuff, and they learn new things. So I think it's okay if the changes are a bit slower as well. Not every game has to be League of Legends, a new meta every other patch, So overall, I think pretty cool patch. Definitely a fan of all these changes. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, make sure to leave a like, go subscribe for more content like this. I'll try to do patch reviews every time a new patch comes out. And yeah, feel free to check out the other content on the channel. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace!